Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sands of time, literally. Imagine the desert of Arabia in the centuries before Islam. Heat so intense the air itself seems to shimmer, dunes rolling endlessly like frozen golden waves, and an emptiness so profound that every oasis feels like a miracle. You hear the crunch of your sandals on gravel, the faint jingle of camel bells, the laughter of traders sharing dates beneath a tattered cloth for shade. And yes, let's be real. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes here without water, shelter, and a whole caravan to guide you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in Arabia, centuries before Muhammad's birth, wandering among tribes whose lives rise and fall with the desert. These tribes aren't just families. They are survival networks. Loyalty to kin is everything, and poetry serves as their memory. Around campfires, poets recite verses about battles, honor, and love. Their words as precious as gold. In fact, quirky detail. Some poets' reputations were so powerful that their enemies feared insults more than swords, believing words themselves carried a kind of magic. Caravans cut across the desert like veins. Mecca, not yet a holy city, is already bustling as a crossroads. You walk through its markets, the smell of spices tickling your nose. Pepper from India, frankincense from Yemen, silk shimmering in the sun. Traders haggle loudly, voices mixing with bleats of goats and brays of donkeys. The Kaaba already stands, a cube of stone draped in cloth, revered by tribes who circle it in rituals older than memory. Scholars still debate the exact details of how those rituals developed. Were they purely local traditions, or echoes of older Abrahamic practices? You pause, watching pilgrims pour water, tie ribbons, whisper prayers in dozens of dialects. The political landscape is loose, scattered. No empire rules here. Instead, powerful tribes dominate patches of desert, competing for water wells and trade routes. Raids are common, swift, camel-mounted attacks to seize livestock or goods. Yet, even in conflict, there's a strange rhythm. Rules of conduct, hospitality codes that protect guests, truces agreed upon during sacred months. You can almost hear the negotiation in tense desert tents, swords sheathed while leaders sip bitter coffee. Religion here is a tapestry. Some worship idols carved of stone and wood, lined up around the Kaaba. Others follow faint echoes of Judaism and Christianity, scattered by trade routes. Zoroastrians, too, filter in from Persia. And then there are the Hanifs, mystics seeking the one true God in solitude, their practices unclear even to modern scholars. Was it proto-monotheism or simply poetic yearning? No one knows for sure. But you imagine a lone figure staring at the night sky, whispering prayers to a power beyond idols, beyond tribes. Life in the desert is harsh, but not joyless. You stroll into a village at dusk, hearing laughter from tents, children chasing each other in sand. Women weaving textiles in patterns that ripple like dunes. Dates are eaten fresh or pressed into cakes, camels milked for sustenance. Music rises. Simple drums, stringed instruments, and voices lift in song. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm blend with the wind's whistle. One mainstream fact anchors this world. The Arabian Peninsula's position made it a bridge of continents. Trade routes ran north to Byzantium, east to Persia, south to Africa, and west to Mediterranean ports. Arabia was not isolated, but entangled in global exchange. Yet here's a quirky twist. While trade flowed freely, maps did not. Many tribes navigated by stars and memory alone, reciting routes in verse so no detail was forgotten. Picture a guide chanting under a starlit sky. Turn east at the lone acacia, travel 3 days to the well of the red rock, then veer north. The desert is not written on parchment, it lives in voices. Tensions build beneath the surface. Tribal rivalries simmer, fueled by honor, vengeance, or simply scarcity. You stand in a marketplace when a sudden argument erupts, knives drawn, only to be calmed by elders invoking sacred months of peace. Yet everyone knows conflict will resume once the truce ends. The desert is both cradle and crucible. It forges resilience, but leaves wounds raw. As night falls, the desert transforms. Heat fades, replaced by cold that seeps through your robe. The stars blaze overhead, more than you've ever seen, Milky Way arching like a silver river, constellations sharp as blades. You lie on a rug, sand cool beneath, listening to jackals cry in the distance. Poets murmur verses to the stars, their words floating into darkness. Historians still argue how cohesive Arabian society really was in these centuries. Some describe it as fragmented, isolated tribes locked in endless cycles of raid and revenge. Others suggest it was more interconnected, bound by trade and shared rituals. The truth lies somewhere in between, chaotic yet rhythmic, fractured yet interlaced. You drift in that ambiguity, lulled by the desert's eternal hum. You close your eyes, imagining the countless footsteps before you. Traders, poets, mystics, raiders, all moving across this land of dust and fire. The air carries whispers of change, faint but rising, like wind before a storm. For now, though, you rest in the desert's cradle, beneath stars that have watched tribes come and go for centuries, waiting for the moment when a new story will begin. The desert dawns again, but now the air feels different. You walk through the narrow streets of Mecca, the sound of traders haggling still buzzing in your ears. But in the distance, you hear another voice, gentle, insistent, carrying words that ripple through alleys like water through dry stone. It is the voice of Muhammad, son of Abdullah, a man known already as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Tonight, you find yourself following that voice. You slip into the hills around Mecca, where caves pierce the rock like hidden mouths. The wind here smells of dust and stone, sharp against your nose. Inside one cave, called Hira, Muhammad once withdrew in solitude. Imagine the silence, only the scrape of stone under your sandals, your breath echoing in narrow space, your heartbeat loud. Here, tradition tells us, he encountered the angel Gabriel. The command was simple yet overwhelming. Recite. Whether the moment was vision, revelation, or something scholars still debate, it marked a turning point not just for one man, but for millions. You sit quietly in the shadows, sensing the tremor of history unfolding in whispers. At first, Muhammad shared his message quietly, among family and close friends. His wife Khadijah believed, supporting him with her wealth and comfort. His cousin Ali, young but bold, stood by him. Abu Bakr, a respected merchant, lent credibility. Slowly, word spread. There is one God, not many. Idols hold no power. The Kaaba is meant for the Creator alone. Such words struck at the heart of Mecca's traditions. You watch as people whisper behind curtains, torn between curiosity and fear. The Kaaba, after all, housed hundreds of idols. Pilgrims came from across Arabia to honor them, and Mecca's economy thrived on this ritual traffic. To challenge idols was to threaten not just belief, but commerce. The Quraysh, Mecca's powerful tribe, grew restless. You can almost hear their debates echoing in stone courtyards. How could one man disrupt centuries of order? The opposition sharpened. Mockery at first, then persecution. followers faced beatings, exile, even death. One mainstream fact: some early Muslims sought refuge in Abyssinia, across the Red Sea, where a Christian king, the Negus, offered protection. This quirky detail stands out: that a Christian ruler gave sanctuary to Muslims when their own kin rejected them. It's a reminder that history twists in unexpected patterns. Back in Mecca, tension boiled. You walk among markets where whispers rise. Merchants warning one another not to trade with Muhammad's followers, tribes enforcing boycotts. Families are split, loyalty torn between tradition and this new faith. By night, the Quran's verses are recited in hushed gatherings, their rhythm filling hearts. By day, you see believers hiding marks of lashings, yet holding firm. Historians still argue how many followers Muhammad had in those early years. Some say only a handful, others suggest dozens. Records blur, memories shift. What is clear is the pressure grew unbearable. The revelation then came: migrate, not just to flee, but to build. You feel the urgency in those words, like footsteps pounding toward a new horizon. The Hijra, the migration to Medina, is a turning point you now witness. Imagine the caravans at night, slipping silently from Mecca, stars guiding them north. You walk with them through rocky passes, sand biting your face, fear sharp in your chest. Will pursuers catch you? Will Medina welcome you? The journey is both exile and promise. Medina is different. Here, tribes are weary of infighting, ready for unity. Agreements are made, Muslims, Jews, and other groups promising to defend one another, to live under shared rules. You step into this fragile experiment, hearing verses revealed that govern not just prayer but contracts, inheritance, warfare. Islam is no longer just belief, it becomes society. The call to prayer rises for the first time. Imagine it: a voice climbing into the dawn, words echoing through narrow streets, calling people to stand shoulder to shoulder. You hear sandals shuffle, robes swish, voices unite in rhythm. In that moment, the faith becomes visible, audible, undeniable. Quirky details survive in tradition. One companion is said to have carried a pigeon on his shoulder, a gentle bird that never left him, so people nicknamed him the Pigeon Man of Medina. Another detail: palm trunks served as the first mosque's pillars, rough bark against your hand as you lean in prayer. Such images make the grandeur of later mosques feel far away, yet rooted in simplicity. Conflicts soon arise. Caravans attacked, battles fought, truces made and broken. You walk through dust after the Battle of Badr, where outnumbered Muslims claim an improbable victory. You hear laments after Uhud, where overconfidence brings defeat. Each clash reshapes the fragile balance. Scholars debate whether these battles were inevitable or provoked, whether they were defense or ambition. You stand in the dust, uncertain, knowing only that survival demanded struggle. Years pass, the Quran's verses unfolding like a river, sometimes sharp as a sword, sometimes soft as rain. In Mecca, the Quraysh resist until at last the balance shifts. You march back with Muhammad, entering the city not in vengeance, but in forgiveness. Idols are toppled from the Kaaba, the stone cube cleansed. The cry rises: one God, one house, one people. The desert that once fractured into endless tribes now feels bound under a new vision. At night, you sit by Medina's walls, hearing stories of revelation, of companions, of the journeys. The desert wind carries sand across your face, but also words that will echo centuries. The prophet's call began as a whisper in a cave, and now it rolls across Arabia like thunder. You close your eyes, sensing that thunder will not stop at desert's edge. It will travel further, across continents, carried by trade, conquest, and memory. The desert feels smaller now. Once, Arabia seemed an isolated stage, a place of poets and caravans. But after the Prophet's passing in 632, the horizon stretches outward. You stand among the faithful in Medina, where grief weighs heavy, yet resolve hardens quickly. Leadership passes to Abu Bakr, the first caliph, whose steady hand reassures trembling hearts. He reminds the people that Muhammad is gone, but the message remains. You hear his voice rise in the mosque, firm yet sorrowful. Whoever worships Muhammad, know that Muhammad is dead. But whoever worships God, he lives and does not die. From here, the Rashidun Caliphate begins its astonishing expansion. You walk at the edge of desert roads, watching riders set out, banners snapping in dry wind. Their destinations are places you've only heard of in stories: Persia, Syria, Egypt. Within a few decades, the Muslim world bursts beyond Arabia's boundaries. One mainstream fact: by 661, the Rashidun controlled an empire stretching from the Libyan desert to the mountains of Central Asia. It is breathtaking, dizzying even, how quickly sand gives way to cities, tents to palaces. But let's not picture only armies. You step into Damascus, a city with shaded courtyards and flowing water, where Arabic words begin to mingle with Greek and Aramaic. In the bazaars, merchants adjust to new rulers, but old routines. Spices sold, cloth unfurled, coins exchanged. The difference lies in contracts now signed under Islamic law, taxes collected in new forms. Yet life, in its mundane rhythm, continues. You stroll under awnings, listening to the chatter. Some voices curious, others suspicious, some already weaving Islam into their lives. Egypt astonishes you most. You arrive in Fustat, the garrison town near the Nile, and the river's breadth alone humbles you. Compared to desert wells, the Nile feels like an ocean, endless and fertile. Here, Muslim settlers learn to farm alongside Copts. The local Christians, palm trees sway, feluccas sail, children laugh on the banks. A quirky detail: tradition says when the caliph in Medina heard of the Nile's ancient ritual, throwing a maiden into the river to ensure its flood, he sent instead a letter addressed to the Nile, declaring that it flowed only by God's will. The river rose that year anyway, and people marveled at the new order. Was it miracle or coincidence? Historians shrug, but the story lingers. In Persia, the encounter is different. The Sasanian Empire, once proud and mighty, falters under the strain of war. You stand in Ctesiphon, its arches looming, palaces echoing with emptiness as armies withdraw. Persian scribes copy records into Arabic. Physicians share medicines, poets adapt verse. Yet resistance is fierce too. Rebellions breaking out, alliances shifting. You hear the clang of swords in mountain passes, the shouts of warriors defending their valleys. The transition is not smooth, yet it is lasting. The expansion is not only about conquest. You watch as Islam adapts. Arabic becomes the language of governance. But local customs persist. Syrians still eat their bread with olive oil. Egyptians still paint icons. Persians still recite poetry by moonlight. Scholars still debate whether this period was one of tolerance or imposition. In truth, it was both. Taxes for non-Muslims could weigh heavy, yet their faiths often survived intact. You stand in a church ringing its bells, only a street away from a mosque calling the faithful to prayer. Inside Medina, meanwhile, debates rage. The community must decide how to interpret revelations, how to lead without the Prophet. Abu Bakr is followed by Umar, then Uthman, then Ali. Each caliph leaves his mark. Umar known for justice, Uthman for compiling the Quran into a single text, Ali for his wisdom and the painful strife that surrounds him. You feel the tension build, like storm clouds. Civil war flickers, loyalties fracture, and the unity of the Rashidun gives way to uncertainty. Quirky details persist even amid upheaval. Soldiers carry dates in their pouches, cheap and filling, a taste of Arabia no matter where they marched. Some accounts describe camels adorned with bells and tassels, jingling cheerfully on long campaigns. Imagine the surreal sight. An army both fearsome and festive, crossing deserts and rivers with songs rising into the night. Historians still argue about why the expansion succeeded so quickly. Was it divine inspiration, as believers insist? Or were the Byzantine and Sasanian empires simply exhausted, brittle after years of fighting each other? Perhaps both. You walk between ruined fortresses and bustling markets, sensing that momentum is never single-threaded. It is woven from weakness, opportunity, vision, and chance. By the time Ali falls in 661, assassinated during prayer, the Rashidun era closes. You stand in the quiet after his death, dust heavy in the air, voices hushed with uncertainty. The desert once fractured has become an empire, but now it trembles with questions. Who should lead? How should authority be passed? And what does unity truly mean? As night settles, you lie beneath foreign stars. Not the clear blaze of Arabia, but a sky softened by Mediterranean haze. You think of the journeys you've made, from Mecca's markets to the Nile's banks, from Persian arches to Syrian hills. The Prophet's call has traveled far, and yet you sense the story is only beginning. The dust of the Rashidun settles, and in its place rises a dynasty with palaces instead of tents, minted coins instead of handwritten contracts, and rulers who see the desert not as boundary, but as launching ground. You are in Damascus now, under the Umayyads. The city smells of jasmine in the evening and spices by day. Its markets filled with traders shouting in Arabic, Greek, Coptic, Persian, all mingling into one restless hum. The empire has stretched wider than anyone once imagined. From the Atlantic coast of Morocco and Spain in the west to the frontiers of India in the east. You walk through its streets, and you feel the pulse of something immense, like a caravan stretched across continents. The caliphs of the Umayyad dynasty rule from Damascus, their white stone mosque standing like a beacon. The Great Mosque of Damascus, built on the site of a Byzantine church, astonishes you as you step inside. Mosaics glitter with golden vines and landscapes, shimmering in lamplight. Pilgrims shuffle across cool marble, their whispers rising into the dome. This is a mainstream fact. Under the Umayyads, monumental architecture becomes a statement of faith and power. Cities that once looked east to Constantinople or Persia now turn their gaze toward Damascus. Still, the expansion is not only about power. You walk westward into Al-Andalus, where Cordoba blooms. Picture its winding streets, orange blossoms perfuming the air, lamps lighting courtyards at night. Scholars will later gather here, translating texts from Arabic, Greek, and Hebrew, feeding knowledge back into Europe. But for now, you hear music drift from courtyards, lutes strummed softly, poems recited about love and gardens. Quirky detail. One Umayyad prince exiled from Damascus fled all the way here, carrying a cutting of a Syrian palm tree. He planted it in Spain, saying it reminded him of home. You pause by its leaves, swaying under a foreign sun, and you feel the ache of exile woven into empire. North Africa, too, hums with change. You walk through Kairouan, a city in Tunisia where camel caravans clatter into markets, their loads heavy with salt and gold from the Sahara. Mosques here are simple but solid, courtyards echoing with prayer calls that ripple over desert dunes. Historians still argue how quickly Islam spread in North Africa. Was it by force, by treaties, or by merchants? The truth is tangled. You listen to Berber tribes debating under tents, some eager, some resistant, their voices blending with the wind. The East offers another face. In Sindh, on the edge of India, the call to prayer echoes over riverbanks where temples still ring with bells. Soldiers build garrisons, merchants dock ships, cultures brush against each other uneasily. You see coins stamped with Arabic script alongside Sanskrit markings, evidence of worlds colliding and overlapping. Here, Islam does not erase but settles alongside, like a new river flowing into an old delta. Yet beneath the grandeur, the Umayyad dynasty breeds discontent. You walk into a village and you hear murmurs that Arabs are favored above non-Arabs, that taxes weigh unevenly. Converts from Persia or Central Asia sometimes feel second class. At night in Damascus, poets mock rulers with sharp verses, their words slipping like daggers under doors. The dynasty's glittering palaces cannot silence growing unrest. Quirky customs color the empire. Falconry flourishes. Caliphs keep trained birds to hunt with, their wings beating against desert skies. Banquets are filled with roasted lamb, dates dipped in honey, wine sipped despite prohibitions. One caliph, legend says, kept a fountain that flowed not with water, but with rose water. Was it fact or fancy? Scholars still debate, but the scent lingers in stories. The dynasty lasts less than a century, yet its impact is vast. You march beside armies that once seemed impossible, crossing the Pyrenees into France, halted at Tours, pushing into Central Asia, meeting Chinese envoys. Imagine the shock of an Arab horseman riding under desert stars, suddenly encountering silk-robed diplomats who bring paper, a material unknown before. One mainstream fact: the Battle of Talas in 751 introduced papermaking to the Muslim world, and from there to Europe centuries later. As you hold a sheet of smooth parchment in your hands, you realize how far ideas travel alongside armies. The end of the Umayyads comes as abruptly as their rise. In 750, rebellion brews. You hear drums in Kufa, whispers in Khorasan, black banners unfurling under Abbasid hands. Discontent with Arab privilege fuels revolt, and when the storm breaks, it is merciless. Damascus falls, palaces burn, and the Umayyad line is slaughtered, save for that single prince who escapes west. Planting his palm in Cordoba, you stand in the ashes of Damascus. Mosaics blackened by smoke, courtyards empty. The desert wind whistles through abandoned halls. Yet the story does not end. The Abbasids will rise, with Baghdad as their jewel, and the hum of knowledge will replace the clang of swords. But tonight, you linger in Damascus, hearing faint echoes of falcon wings, fountains of rose water, and the call to prayer still rising, steady, over a city that once ruled half the known world. The black banners of the Abbasids rise over the ruins of Damascus, and now you drift eastward to the banks of the Tigris. Here, on a bend of the river, a city will rise so luminous that its name becomes legend: Baghdad. You arrive when the dust is still fresh. Cranes of wood lifting stone, masons humming as they work, boats crowding the waterway with timber and marble. The Caliph al-Mansur has chosen this place deliberately, near trade routes and fertile fields, and commands that it be built as a perfect circle. Imagine that. A whole city shaped like the wheel of time itself. You stand in the center, where palaces gleam and mosques rise, their domes reflecting sunlight like lanterns in the day. Streets radiate outward like spokes. Markets clamor in their corners, and the smell of cinnamon, leather, and ink swirls together. The round city is no longer desert. It is order, symmetry, and vision. One mainstream fact: Baghdad becomes the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. Founded in 762 and flourishing for centuries as one of the world's great capitals. At night, oil lamps glow along narrow streets, and you hear a different kind of hum. Not armies marching, but scholars debating. You slip into the House of Wisdom, where scribes dip reeds into ink, translating Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic. Scrolls are unrolled, diagrams sketched, numbers written that look both familiar and foreign. You peer over a scholar's shoulder as he copies Euclid, then another who murmurs over medical treatises of Galen. The clatter of languages fills the hall, words flowing like rivers converging. Historians note this as one of humanity's greatest transfers of knowledge. But they still argue over how much was preservation, how much innovation. You feel the blend. Old wisdom carried forward, but reshaped with new questions. Quirky detail. Baghdad's scholars are not all solemn. Some tell stories, spinning tales into collections that later become 1001 Nights. You imagine Scheherazade whispering stories under candlelight, her voice weaving worlds of flying carpets and hidden caves, while outside scribes argue about algebra. The city lives in both reason and wonder, logic and dream. Science blooms here. You walk into an observatory where astronomers chart stars, their eyes red from nights under the sky. They debate whether Earth spins, whether stars move or stand fixed. Astrolabes gleam in their hands, brass circles etched with markings that let sailors navigate seas. Quirky anecdote. Some scholars argued so fiercely about the moon's size that they sent men into desert plains to measure shadows for days. Their answers, though debated, brought humanity closer to the cosmos. Medicine thrives too. Hospitals in Baghdad are unlike anything you've seen. Wards for men and women, pharmacies stocked with herbs, physicians writing manuals. You see jars labeled with saffron, frankincense, mint, and stranger things. Powdered pearls, dried scorpions. One doctor explains fevers in terms of humors. Another debates infection. Patients lie on mats, sipping broth, while students cluster around, copying notes. Baghdad is not only about science, it is about beauty. You stroll through palaces where walls glitter with mosaics, gardens bloom with fountains, and courtyards echo with laughter. Poets sit by the water, composing verses about love and wine. Yes, wine despite prohibitions. Caliphs host banquets where cups overflow, music swells, dancers twirl. Quirky but true. One caliph's pet monkey once drank wine until he stumbled across the hall, to the guests' great amusement. Scholars may disapprove, but the memory lingers in gossip. The empire stretches vast. You travel with merchants leaving Baghdad, their caravans heavy with silk, spices, and books. They ride toward China, toward India, toward Africa. You see ships on the Indian Ocean, their sails catching monsoon winds, carrying Islam as much through trade as through conquest. Ports hum in Zanzibar, Gujarat, and Malacca, voices mingling under starlight. Yet even in Baghdad's brilliance, shadows creep. Power shifts, caliphs grow decadent, provinces restless. Governors in far lands act like kings themselves. Scholars still debate. Was this golden age built on unity, or on fractures masked by wealth? You sense both. Baghdad's glow is bright, but fragile, like a lantern in the wind. You return to the House of Wisdom one last time. The ink smell is sharp, the lamps glow warm, the pages whisper. A mathematician scribbles symbols that look like spells, algebra, while a poet hums verses nearby. Outside, the city hums with life. Markets closing, prayer calls rising, children laughing in alleys. You realize you are in the heart of something extraordinary. A city where stars, stories, and souls converge. Night falls, and the Tigris reflects the moon. You lean on its bank, cool breeze in your face, and watch lanterns bob on boats drifting downriver. Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasids, glows behind you, a circle of light in a darkened world. And those centuries will bring fire and ruin. Tonight it is alive, a golden hum you will carry with you forever. The hum of Baghdad fades behind you as you drift southward, then eastward, following the smell of salt and spices that clings to the air. You stand now on the edge of the Indian Ocean, watching wooden ships with stitched sails sway gently in the harbor. These are dhows, vessels of Muslim merchants, their hulls creaking as sailors load them with sacks of pepper, cinnamon, and cloves. The ropes are thick with tar, the decks sticky with resin, the air alive with gull cries. A warm wind blows from the sea, carrying with it not just cargo, but stories, prayers, and faith. Here is one mainstream fact. Islam spread not only by conquest, but by commerce. You step aboard a dhow bound for Gujarat or perhaps Zanzibar, and you see no soldiers here, only traders and imams. The call to prayer rises at dawn, the men kneeling on worn mats facing westward, their bodies swaying gently with the ship's rhythm. Faith travels on the same wind as trade. The sea is wide, yet these sailors know it well. They read the stars like books, tracing paths across the waves. They know when the monsoons blow east and when they blow west, charting seasons into maps etched not on parchment, but in memory. Quirky detail. Some sailors carried parrots in cages, their bright feathers flashing in the sun, both as companions and as trade goods. You sit near one bird as it mimics the prayer call in a squawk, earning laughter from the crew. You arrive in East Africa, where the island of Zanzibar thrums with life. Markets burst with ivory tusks, gold dust, and spices piled high like dunes. Women in bright cloths bargain with merchants in turbans, their languages blending, Swahili, Arabic, Persian. You taste food cooked with coconut and tamarind, hear drums pounding in rhythm with chants. Islam seeps into this world not through battles, but through marriages, mosques rising beside choral houses. Scholars still argue. Was conversion here driven by faith, by trade alliances, or by the appeal of joining a wider network of law and literacy? The answer, perhaps, is all of these. Then you sail to India, landing in Gujarat. The air smells of cardamom and smoke, the markets crowded with silk weavers and jewelers. Here, Muslim traders settle in coastal towns, building mosques whose arches echo with both Arabic and Sanskrit influences. Children study Quran by lamplight, their voices weaving into the chants of Hindu temples across the street. You walk through these towns at dusk, hearing bells and prayer calls overlap, a harmony and tension scholars still debate centuries later. Further east, your ship rides monsoon winds toward the Malay world. You arrive in Malacca, where the strait is crowded with junks from China, dhows from Arabia, and boats carved from single trees. Merchants haggle over peppercorns, gold, and textiles. Here, Islam spreads quietly, folded into trade deals and royal courts. Sultans adopt the faith, and their people follow. Mosques rising with pointed roofs instead of domes, adapted to tropical rains. A quirky note. Local rulers sometimes blended Islamic law with older customs, so you might find a sultan quoting both the Quran and an ancient Malay epic in the same court. You stand at the edge of such a gathering, sensing both continuity and change. Back in Baghdad, the caliph's influence feels distant, but on these coasts, the faith thrives in its own colors. In East Africa, coral mosques stand beside baobab trees. In India, domes glow with carved lotuses. In Southeast Asia, wooden mosques echo with frogs croaking in rice paddies. Islam is no longer confined to desert or palace. It has become oceanic, fluid, adaptable. Quirky images linger. In Kilwa, a sultan minted gold coins that ended up as far as China. In Sumatra, travelers wrote of pepper so abundant that it seemed to fall from trees. In Malabar, sailors swore they had seen giant fish that followed ships for weeks. Was it fact or sailor's tale? Historians smile at the uncertainty, yet note how these stories carried Islam as surely as spices. The sea is not without danger. You grip the railing as storms roar, waves slamming the deck, rain blinding. Sailors shout prayers into the wind, tying down cargo, their hands bleeding from ropes. Yet when calm returns, they laugh, sharing dates and dried fish, the storm already fading into story. Faith deepens at sea. Every prayer feels closer to the divine when the horizon swallows all else. At night, under a canopy of stars, you lie on the deck, listening to the water slap wood. The stars blaze as they did over Arabia, but here they guide across oceans. You hear the muezzin's call rise from the bowl, thin but steady, mingling with the sigh of waves. Islam, carried by wind and current, slips into new shores, not with swords, but with stories, with spices, with the creak of sails. Historians still debate how voluntary these conversions were. Did locals adopt the faith eagerly, pragmatically, or reluctantly? You sit in a market where merchants ink contracts in Arabic, and you realize the line between faith and commerce is blurred. Belief is shaped not just by sermons, but by spices, by law, by the rhythm of global trade. As dawn breaks over the sea, you watch the sails fill with wind once more. The ship tilts, ropes strain, the horizon beckons. You know now that the history of Muslim countries is not bound by desert or river, but by oceans. The tide carries faith farther than any army could march, leaving minarets where once only waves whispered. The sea wind fades, and you find yourself back on land, standing beneath domes that glitter in the sun, in cities where scrolls and compasses outnumber swords. This is the age when the world of Muslim countries does not just trade goods, it trades ideas. You wander into Baghdad again, though not its palaces this time, but its libraries, where ink stains more hands than blood does blades. The House of Wisdom hums like a hive. Scribes dip pens into ink, scratching endlessly across parchment. The air smells of oil lamps, old leather, and dried reeds. Scholars argue in low voices, some reciting verses of Aristotle, others scribbling new theorems on geometry. You pause at one table where numbers twist into patterns. Here is algebra, first teased into form by Al-Khwarizmi. He writes not just for scholars, but for merchants, for judges, for anyone who must calculate shares or inheritance. The equations look simple, but they hum with power. Bridges that will one day span centuries. You wander further. Astronomers bend over astrolabes, brass discs etched with stars and lines. They tilt them against the sun, measure shadows, murmur about equinoxes. One mainstream fact: Muslim astronomers calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, centuries before globes showed it. Yet even here, uncertainty lingers. Did they truly believe the Earth rotated? Or did they see it as still beneath circling heavens? Scholars still argue, the stars themselves silent above. Hospitals too impress you. In Cairo, you step into a Bimaristan, part hospital, part university. The courtyard is cool, shaded by arches, with fountains where patients wash. Physicians walk among beds, checking pulses, writing prescriptions. Shelves hold jars labeled in flowing Arabic script: saffron, opium, vinegar, rose oil. Students follow doctors, whispering notes, their sandals slapping marble floors. Quirky detail. Some hospitals even offered music therapy, with musicians hired to play lutes and flutes, believing melodies soothed the heart. You pause to listen, and for a moment, you feel the air lighten. In Andalus, the knowledge glitters differently. You walk through Cordoba, where lamps line streets, lighting nights long before most of Europe knew such glow. Libraries here house hundreds of thousands of volumes, copied by careful hands. Architects carve arches that layer endlessly, red and white stripes like ripples in stone. In the great mosque, shafts of light pour through latticed windows, dust dancing in golden beams. You sit on a mat, hearing scholars debate philosophy, whether reason can exist alongside faith, whether Aristotle and the Quran can speak together. Historians note these debates fueled both harmony and tension, shaping thought for centuries. Quirky inventions dot your path. In Damascus, you find water wheels that lift river water to gardens, their groaning wood echoing across valleys. In Baghdad, you hear of a man named Al-Jazari, who designs clocks shaped like elephants, peacocks, and boats, their gears whirring like hidden music. Children laugh at these contraptions, though their mechanisms are no less precise than sundials or hourglasses. You picture one clock ticking in a palace hall, water dripping into bowls that move puppets on cue. Playful, yet brilliant, you stroll into a market in Samarkand, where silk shimmers and paper crinkles. Paper. Introduced after the Battle of Talas, it spreads now like wildfire. Scribes no longer scrape on parchment alone. They fold smooth sheets, cheaper, quicker, easier to carry. Ideas multiply because paper multiplies. Quirky fact: some merchants used paper for checks, writing promises of payment that banks honored far away. You hold one, its ink faint, but its trust immense, a system that feels surprisingly modern. Yet for all the brilliance, uncertainty lingers. Did scholars truly share freely, or were they guarded, keeping secrets within guilds? Did philosophy walk hand in hand with theology, or did it always teeter near conflict? Historians still debate, pointing to records of both flowering and suppression. You, walking through lamplit libraries, feel both currents. Wonder in abundance, yet always shadowed by control. You end the night in a garden in Isfahan, where water channels gurgle and roses spill fragrance. Poets gather here, their words soft as silk. One recites verses of Rumi, spinning metaphors of love and longing that blur boundaries of human and divine. Another sings of stars, of loss, of the fragile joy of wine. You lean back against cool stone, eyes lifted to constellations, and hear the blending of reason and rapture. This is the world of Muslim countries in their golden age. Not only swords and sultans, but scrolls, stars, and song. It is the murmur of scholars under oil lamps, the turning of astrolabes under sky, the scent of herbs in hospitals, the laughter of children at mechanical elephants. It is the hum of knowledge itself, restless and radiant. As dawn creeps in, you rise from the garden. The lamps flicker out one by one, but the words, the stars, the music linger. You carry them forward into the next stretch of history, where sultans and scholars will continue their endless dance. You leave behind the glow of scholars' lamps and step into courts where politics hum louder than poetry. The banners of new rulers rise, and you find yourself in the world of sultans and viziers, of Seljuks and Persians, where authority bends and blends. The desert has given way to palaces of carved stone, and the echo of prayer mixes with the murmur of debate in madrasas. The Seljuks are Turkic in origin, once riders across the steppes, now settled rulers with crowns on their brows. You arrive in Nishapur, a city of domes and minarets, where turquoise tiles shimmer under the sun. Soldiers in lamellar armor parade past, their horses snorting, their arrows bristling in quivers. These warriors once swept into Persia, conquering swiftly. Yet they do not erase what they find. Instead, Persian language, poetry, and custom seep into their rule. You walk through their courts, hearing Arabic recited for law, Persian for poetry, Turkish for command. A triad of tongues fills the air like overlapping songs. One mainstream fact: the Seljuks established the Nizamiya madrasas, schools that formalized Islamic education. You step into one now, through a courtyard shaded by plane trees, where students sit cross-legged with books open on wooden stands. A teacher gestures broadly, quoting Quran, law, and philosophy. Around him, scribes note every word. Some lessons are legal, others mathematical, still others theological. The madrasa hums with arguments. How to reconcile reason with revelation, how to weigh the sayings of the Prophet against practical governance. Historians debate whether these schools encouraged open inquiry or trained conformity. You listen, hearing both sparks of curiosity and the stern weight of orthodoxy. Quirky details abound. Students often carried inkpots tied to their belts, little containers clinking as they walked. Some carved doodles into wooden benches, scribbles of stars or verses that survive faintly even today. Imagine one tired student tracing a camel on his board during a long lecture, only to be scolded back to attention. Even in solemn institutions, human restlessness hums. In the Seljuk courts, viziers hold power as much as sultans. You meet Nizam al-Mulk, the famed vizier, his beard long, his gaze sharp. He guides rulers with strategy, founds schools, writes a treatise on governing. His words remind you that empires rise not just by swords, but by pens. He stresses justice, order, balance, yet shadows lurk. The assassins, a secretive sect, stalk corridors of power. One tale says they once disguised themselves as gardeners, slipping into palaces with knives hidden in baskets of herbs. Historians wonder how much of their reputation was truth and how much exaggeration. You pause in a garden, half expecting whispers among roses. Seljuk architecture astonishes too. You walk into mosques with domes high as the sky, their ceilings painted with stars. Muqarnas, those honeycomb carvings, cascade from arches, catching light like frozen waterfalls. Courtyards are paved with polished stone that glitters after rain. You trail your fingers along glazed tiles, cool and smooth, their blue patterns swirling like rivers. Quirky fact: some mosques even had fountains that cooled air in summer, a clever mix of utility and beauty. You sip from one, the water sharp and fresh, and feel the genius of blending art with comfort. Persian culture thrives under the Seljuks. Poets sing in courts, Omar Khayyam with his quatrains of wine and stars, reminding you that even amid scholars, doubt and longing linger. His verses drift through the hall. A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou. You smile, hearing the timeless yearning in his voice. At the same time, epics like the Shahnameh are recited. Tales of kings and heroes that root the Seljuks in a Persian heritage older than Islam itself. You sit on a carpet, listening to a bard chant, his words weaving battles, betrayals, and romances into the night. Yet unity never lasts long. Factions fracture, heirs quarrel, borders tremble. You march with Seljuk armies into Anatolia, where Byzantines resist fiercely. The Battle of Manzikert in 1071 shifts the balance. One mainstream fact: it opened much of Anatolia to Turkic settlement. You picture the clash, arrows raining, banners snapping, dust rising. Yet afterward, instead of one empire, smaller sultanates sprout, each ruling its patch of land, each vying for supremacy. Scholars argue whether this fragmentation weakened the Muslim world or simply spread its culture more widely. You sense both truths, like cracks in a vase that nonetheless spreads light beautifully through them. Quirky moments lighten the tension. In one chronicle, A Seljuk ruler is said to have owned a pet lion, which roamed his courtyard calmly among courtiers. Guests never quite knew whether to bow to the sultan or the beast. You imagine the scene. Dignitaries sweating, pretending composure while the lion flicks its tail. Whether legend or truth, it speaks of power displayed with theatrical flair. As night falls, you stand on a hill above Isfahan, the Seljuks' jewel. Below, domes glow faintly in moonlight. Minarets rise like spears against the sky. Markets murmur even at dusk. The city feels alive, humming with trade, learning, prayer, and poetry. Yet you sense its fragility too, the way power is always borrowed, never owned. Sultans rise and fall, viziers guide and are slain, poets sing and fade. The Seljuks shine brilliantly, but like stars, their brilliance will not last forever. You lie back in the grass, the air scented with jasmine, and look up. The same stars Omar Khayyam sang of glimmer above, silent and eternal. Empires may vanish, but their songs, their tiles, their whispers linger. And you, resting beneath this Seljuk sky, carry them onward into the next chapter. The Seljuks fade into memory, and now you find yourself standing at a gateway of stone and dust where worlds collide. It is Jerusalem, the city of gold and sorrow, where domes glint in the sun and walls whisper of prayers layered for centuries. The air here tastes of incense and ash, of bread baked in clay ovens, of tension you can almost touch. This is the era of the Crusades, when knights ride from Europe under the sign of the cross, and armies gather under crescent banners, each believing they guard sacred ground. You walk through narrow streets where Christians, Jews, and Muslims once mingled, selling spices and candles, speaking in a babel of tongues. Bells toll, muezzins call, horns sound. Yet the peace phrase when news arrives. An army from far-off lands marches, armored men who carry unfamiliar banners. One mainstream fact. In 1099, the First Crusade captured Jerusalem, slaughtering thousands, the streets said to have run red. Yet historians still argue whether the accounts exaggerated for effect, or whether the truth was as grim as the chronicles claim. You shiver in the heat, feeling echoes of screams beneath the stones. But history is never only horror. You slip north to Antioch, then east to Damascus, where Muslim leaders debate. Some quarrel, some unite. Among them, one name will rise, Salah al-Din, Saladin. You see him not as the statue of legend, but as a man, patient, calculating, merciful where others expected vengeance. In 1187, he retakes Jerusalem. Yet instead of butchery, he offers clemency, allowing Christian civilians to leave. The city breathes again, less from triumph than from relief. You walk its walls at dusk, the dome of the rock glowing golden, and you hear both sighs of sorrow and hymns of thanksgiving. Quirky detail. Saladin was said to be so frugal in personal life that when he died, he left little wealth, despite ruling vast lands. Chroniclers wrote that only a single coin and a worn garment remained, a strange contrast to the riches he commanded in war. You picture a sultan's tent not glittering with gold, but plain, his treasure measured in loyalty, not jewels. The Crusades stretch for centuries, wave after wave, armies landing, clashing, retreating. You drift through Acre, a city by the sea, where knights build fortresses with walls so thick you can still press your palms against them today. Markets fill with Venetian merchants, Genoese sailors, Arab traders. It feels less like a battlefield than a bazaar of competing ambitions. Was this truly a holy war, or a scramble for trade routes dressed in sanctity? Scholars argue still, the line between faith and profit blurred as sea spray on stone. You walk through a camp at night. Tents flicker with torchlight. Armor hangs beside saddles. Prayers rise from both sides, in different tongues, but equal intensity. Horses stamp the ground, dogs bark, drums beat. And yet, when dawn comes, some soldiers trade quietly across lines. Wine for grain, stories for cloth. War and commerce always intertwined. In Egypt, the Mamluks rise. Slaves turn soldiers, their discipline unmatched. You hear their hoofbeats in Cairo streets, the clatter of swords drilled with precision. They will shatter Crusader footholds, ending European kingdoms in the Levant. One mainstream fact. In 1291, the Mamluks captured Acre, the last Crusader stronghold, marking the end of the Crusades in the Holy Land. You stand on its ramparts as ships flee into the sea, the air thick with smoke and the cries of departure. But the Crusades are not only swords, they are crossroads. You wander into a spice stall in Damascus, where cinnamon and nutmeg lie in piles beside pepper and sugar. These goods flow westward, fueling European appetites. You glance at the merchant's ledger. Arabic numerals etched clearly, easier to read than Roman ones. It is not only faiths that cross here, but mathematics, medicine, architecture, and tales. Quirky image. Knights returning to Europe carried watermelons and apricots, fruits once exotic. Imagine a farmer in France biting into a melon for the first time, puzzled and delighted. Historians still debate the Crusades' legacy. Were they catastrophic interruptions or bridges of exchange? You walk through Jerusalem at night, hearing prayers in many tongues, and sense both. Painful scars remain, yet ideas traveled too. You picture Templars studying Arabic texts, scholars in Toledo translating works that will ignite Europe's Renaissance. Conflict and contact, braided inseparably. As evening deepens, you stand before the dome of the rock. Its tiles shimmer blue, gold rising against the purple sky. The city is quiet now, save for the rustle of wind. You lean against cool stone, feeling centuries in its bones. Conquerors, pilgrims, poets, merchants. Jerusalem remains what it has always been, a city too heavy with meaning to ever rest. You close your eyes, hearing bells and calls, remembering both swords and scrolls, both grief and exchange. The Crusades were a storm, yes, but also a crossroad, where cultures collided and, however unwillingly, shared. You breathe deeply, letting the tension settle, and step onward into the next age, where Mongol hoofbeats thunder on the horizon. The air grows colder, sharper. You stand now on the vast steppes, where grass bends endlessly in the wind and hoofbeats rumble like distant thunder. The Mongols are coming. From far off Mongolia, riders sweep westward, their arrows darkening skies, their horses devouring miles. You feel the earth tremble beneath their charge, the sound like drums rolled by heaven itself. Cities that once stood proud now burn in days. You walk into Baghdad in 1258, the jewel of the Abbasids, its libraries swollen with books, its bazaars thick with perfume and silk. The Tigris glitters under winter skies, yet fear lingers. Then, the gates fall. Hulagu Khan's armies surge in, and Baghdad shatters. One mainstream fact. The libraries of Baghdad, including the House of Wisdom, were destroyed. Chroniclers say books were flung into the Tigris until the river ran black with ink. Scholars debate if this was literal truth or poetic exaggeration. But the image clings like smoke. You imagine pages drifting, words dissolving in currents. You wander among ruins, the smell of ash thick, minarets toppled, silence broken only by crows. Survivors shuffle in shock, their world ended. The Mongols had no patience for marble domes or golden manuscripts. Yet the story is not only destruction, for in other places, the tide shifts. You travel to Egypt, to Cairo, where the Mamluks rise. Former slave soldiers, hardened by discipline, they form a wall against Mongol advance. In 1260, at the Battle of Ain Jalut, they halt the unstoppable. You stand on that battlefield, dust choking, horses screaming, swords flashing. Against odds, the Mamluks hold. The Mongol wave that drowned so many cities finally breaks. You hear cheers rise in Arabic and Turkish, prayers shouted skyward in relief. Cairo swells with pride. Mosques rise, their minarets spearing the sky. The Sultan Baybars strengthens the realm, his lions carved into stone gates. Quirky detail. Baybars loved hunting so much that his court teemed with falcons and cheetahs, trained to chase gazelles. Imagine courtiers nervously sipping sherbet while a cheetah lounges near the cushions. Power and wildness, side by side, the Mamluks make Cairo a center of learning, commerce, and faith. You walk through Khan al-Khalili Bazaar, its lanterns glowing like fireflies, its stalls bursting with copper, silk, and spices. Merchants haggle, poets recite, imams preach. Pilgrims set out for Mecca, caravans trailing south, guarded by soldiers. Cairo becomes not just a city of defense, but a beacon of life. Meanwhile, the Mongols shift. Some convert to Islam, their fury tempered by faith. You step into ill-Khanid Persia, where Mongol rulers commission mosques and fund scholars. Domes rise again, painted with turquoise tiles, minarets curling like flames. Historians note this paradox. The destroyers of Baghdad later rebuilt Islamic culture in Persia. Was it redemption, pragmatism, or simply the river of history flowing strangely? No one can say. Quirky stories ripple through this era. One Mongol Khan, after converting, supposedly banned alcohol, only to sneak cups behind palace curtains. Another ordered gardens filled with exotic animals, deer, elephants, even ostriches. So his court looked like Noah's Ark reborn. You walk those gardens, hearing strange cries, smelling hay, feeling the surreal mix of conquest and curiosity. In Damascus, artisans carve wood and weave textiles. In Samarkand, blue domes rise, glittering under Central Asian skies. You pause in bazaars where traders spread carpets dyed crimson, bowls painted with swirls, manuscripts copied in elegant script. Life persists, reshaping itself after storms. Historians still argue whether the Mongol invasion permanently crippled Islamic civilization or simply transformed it. Was Baghdad's loss a fatal blow? Or did new centers, Cairo, Samarkand, Isfahan, carry the torch? You sense both. The ink that bled into the Tigris cannot be reclaimed. Yet the words echo in other halls, rewritten by other hands. At night, you lie under Mongol skies, the wind sharp, stars cold and clear. You hear the jangle of horse harnesses, the crackle of campfires, the murmur of prayers in Turkic, Arabic, Persian. The empire of the horse has thundered through, but the story of Muslim lands does not end in ashes. Out of ruin, new dynasties stir, new domes glitter, new songs rise. You breathe deeply, the air sharp with smoke and sagebrush, and you feel the balance. Destruction and creation, terror and beauty, all flowing in cycles. The Mongols may have ended a golden age, but they also carved a path for others to shine. Ahead, the Ottomans wait. Their crescent banners still furled, their capital yet to be taken. But for tonight, you rest among the echoes of hoofbeats fading into the night. The hoofbeats fade, and when you open your eyes, you are standing before walls so massive they seem to scrape the horizon. This is Constantinople, the city once called the Queen of Cities, ringed with stone and guarded by seas. The air is tense in 1453, filled with smoke, prayer, and cannon fire. You are with the Ottomans now, their banners rippling red and crescented, Their leader Mehmet II, barely 21 years old, yet already called the Conqueror. You hear the thunder first? Cannons unlike anything the city has ever known. Bronze monsters built by Hungarian engineers roar against walls thought unbreachable. Dust clouds rise, masonry shatters, the ground trembles. The Byzantines fight desperately, bells ringing in Hagia Sophia, men lining ramparts with crossbows and hope. Yet day after day, the Ottoman tide swells. One mainstream fact. On May 29th, 1453, Constantinople falls, ending the Byzantine Empire and beginning centuries of Ottoman rule. You feel the moment as gates splinter and cries echo. An empire closes its book, another opens it. You walk through the city in its aftermath. Hagia Sophia, once echoing with hymns, now resounds with the call to prayer. Lamps burn, carpets unroll, minarets rise. The marble still gleams, mosaics shimmer faintly behind plaster, and you sense continuity amid change. Historians argue, did Mehmet spare the city out of vision or pragmatism? Whichever the reason, Istanbul becomes the new capital, the Ottoman jewel. A bridge between continents, the Ottomans build with grandeur. You stroll through Topkapi Palace, where courtyards bloom with fountains, where jeweled daggers glint in treasury rooms. Kitchens bustle with cauldrons the size of bathtubs, simmering lamb and rice for thousands. Quirky detail. Palace parrots once greeted visitors with squawks of Turkish phrases, startling dignitaries mid-bow. Even here, among gold and silk, humor finds its place. Domes define the skyline. You walk beneath those of the Blue Mosque, its interior glowing with tens of thousands of Iznik tiles, their blues and greens like rippling waves. Light pours through stained windows, softening stone into serenity. Architects like Sinan craft mosques that feel both immense and intimate, blending arches and air so that worshippers feel lifted toward heaven. You press your palm to cool marble, sensing the labor of artisans whose names are forgotten, but whose work endures. The empire expands. You march with janissaries, soldiers trained from youth, their discipline unyielding, their white hats distinct. They carry rifles when others still wield bows, their steps thudding like a single heartbeat. In the Balkans, in Hungary, in Arabia, the crescent spreads. Yet in these conquests, cultures mingle. You step into Sarajevo, where churches, synagogues, and mosques stand within sight of one another. In Cairo, Ottoman governors walk through Mamluk-built mosques, layering eras upon each other. Quirky anecdotes slip into chronicles. One sultan, Selim II, was said to drink so much wine that courtiers built him a special cellar under Topkapi. Another kept exotic animals, tigers, peacocks, even a rhinoceros, parading them through gardens to impress guests. You imagine dignitaries smiling politely while a rhino snorts beside a fountain, absurd yet real. Istanbul becomes a hub of law and order. Sharia courts operate alongside Kanun, imperial law. Scribes record cases, merchants sign contracts, women petition judges. You slip into a court where a woman demands her dowry, her voice steady, the judge listening gravely. Historians debate. Was Ottoman justice fair or biased? Records show both, but in this moment, you see a system striving, however imperfectly, for balance. Art flourishes. Calligraphers bend over parchment, their pens dancing letters into shapes that seem alive. Miniature painters illustrate manuscripts with gardens, battles, and feasts, their colors bright as jewels. Musicians pluck ouds and strum lutes, their melodies echoing across courtyards. At night, lanterns glow along the Bosphorus, reflections trembling in the water as ships drift past, sails down. You lean on the balustrade, listening to laughter from tea houses, smelling roasted chestnuts, feeling the city's heartbeat. And yet, uncertainty always shadows power. The empire spans continents, but its borders strain. Scholars argue whether its strength lay in flexibility or whether its very diversity sowed fragility. You sense both as you walk. Arabic in markets, Greek in alleys, Armenian in workshops, Turkish in courts. A mosaic glittering, yet always at risk of fracture. At dawn, you climb Galata Tower. The city spreads beneath you, domes, minarets, palaces, markets, ships crowding the Golden Horn. The call to prayer drifts from dozens of minarets, overlapping into a river of sound. The sun rises over Asia, its light spilling onto Europe. And you realize Istanbul is not just a capital, but a crossroads of worlds. The Ottomans have come, and their empire will endure for centuries. Tonight, though, you linger in the glow of a city reborn, its streets alive, its stones whispering of both past empires and future dreams. You step down from the tower, heart steady, ready to follow the crescent banners as they ripple further still. The stones of Istanbul grow dim behind you as you drift east, into lands where domes shimmer with a different light. This is Persia, where dynasties rise and fall like shifting sands, and where the Safavids now weave power with threads of religion and art. You find yourself in Isfahan, a city so graceful that poets call it half the world. The air is fragrant with roses and smoke from copper lamps. The sky arched with a dome as blue as turquoise itself. The Safavid dynasty, beginning in the early 1500s, shapes Persia into something distinct. One mainstream fact: it is under Shah Ismail I that Shia Islam becomes the state religion of Persia, cementing an identity that still defines Iran today. You stand in a courtyard as clerics proclaim sermons, voices carrying across the square, their words fierce, their gestures sweeping. Sunni neighbors bristle, yet the Safavids persist, crafting unity through creed. Historians still debate whether this religious turn was conviction or political strategy, or both. You feel the tension in the air. Devotion sharpened by policy, identity carved by decree. Yet beyond politics, the Safavids turn Isfahan into a jewel. You walk into Nakshi Jahan Square, vast and open, where polo games once thundered before crowds. The square glows with symmetry. Mosques on one side, a palace on another, bazaars stretching endlessly. You stroll through the bazaar's vaulted lanes, carpets spilling like rivers of color. Reds deep as pomegranate seeds, blues bright as sky after rain. Merchants unfurl silks, weigh saffron, polish copper bowls. Quirky fact: travelers once marveled that Isfahan's bazaar was so large you could walk it for days without seeing the same shop twice. You try, yet every turn reveals another lane, another scent, another song. The mosques here lift you into silence. You enter Shah Mosque, its dome vast, its tiles swirling with patterns that seem alive. When you clap your hands beneath the dome, echoes ripple like water, multiplying into dozens of whispers. Builders crafted it, so sound itself became ornament. You sit cross-legged on cool marble, listening as prayers rise and dissolve into air. The walls shimmer with verses in elegant calligraphy, letters curling like vines. You step into Ali Kapu Palace, climbing to its music hall, where plaster niches are carved into delicate shapes. Bottles, flasks, vases, both decoration and acoustics. Musicians once played here, their sounds amplified magically by architecture. You imagine lutes, flutes, and voices blending into evening air, sultans and courtiers swaying gently on cushions. Quirky story: one Safavid Shah was said to delight in watching polo games from this palace balcony, sipping sherbet and clapping when horses thundered below. You lean on the same railing, the square now hushed. but echoes of hooves still seem to shake the stones. Art blooms in every corner. Persian carpets are woven finer than ever. Patterns so intricate they seem alive, knots so small you struggle to see them. Miniature paintings flourish, their colors bright as enamel, depicting gardens, feasts, battles, lovers meeting under moonlight. You hold one, the figures so detailed that even eyelashes are drawn with care. Scholars note how these works mix Persian tradition with Islamic sensibility, a tapestry of identity on silk and paper. Religion deepens, too. Pilgrimage sites in Persia swell, shrines glowing with silver and gold. Pilgrims walk with candles, voices low, tears bright. You join a procession in Mashhad, where the shrine of Imam Reza gleams under lantern light, domes plated with gold, courtyards ringing with prayer. The atmosphere is thick, sorrow, hope, devotion woven tight. Scholars argue whether Safavid rulers genuinely bowed to this piety or used it as a tool of control, perhaps both. For faith and politics rarely walk separately. The Safavid army, meanwhile, bristles with muskets and cannons, a match for Ottomans and Uzbeks. You march with soldiers across deserts, their banners green, their armor shimmering in heat. They face rivals constantly, for this era is one of boundaries and contests. The Ottomans press from the west, the Mughals from the east. Persia is squeezed, yet it endures, its heart firm in Isfahan. Quirky details slip from chronicles. Shah Abbas I, the greatest of the Safavids, was said to disguise himself at night, wandering markets to hear what people truly thought of him. Imagine a king wrapped in a simple cloak, eavesdropping on merchants grumbling about taxes or praising silk prices. Another tale says he once invited European envoys to drink wine, only to outlast them all, proving both his stamina and his humor. You grin at the thought, wine cups tipping, politics swirling behind laughter. Isfahan at night is dreamlike. Lanterns hang from arches, fountains shimmer, gardens glow with fireflies. You walk through Chehel's Sotun Palace, where 40 slender columns reflect in a pool, doubling into infinity. The paintings inside show scenes of battles and feasts, sultans reclining on cushions while dancers whirl. Smoke of incense curls upward, mixing with laughter. You breathe it in, caught between reverence and revelry. Historians debate how much of this brilliance reached the common people. Did peasants in villages feel the glow of Isfahan? Or did they simply toil as before, weaving carpets for markets they would never see? You wander out of the city, into fields where farmers guide oxen. Water wheels creak, children chase goats. Life here is simpler, but still threaded to the empire's grandeur. Each carpet knot, each grain of saffron, a piece of something larger. As dawn arrives, you stand again in the square, its vastness quiet, the call to prayer floating through arches. The Safavids shaped Persia not only with swords, but with tiles, poems, and faith. You feel it in the stone beneath your feet, in the shimmer of blue domes, in the whisper of silk. The Ottomans may command empires, but the Safavids command the heart with color and creed. You close your eyes as the sun rises over Isfahan, bathing its domes in gold. The city hums awake, merchants stir, children laugh. You carry its glow with you, stepping onward into the gardens of India, where another dynasty, the Mughals, awaits, their marble monuments shimmering under an even broader sky. The air shifts again, warm with dust, yet heavy with jasmine, as you drift eastward into the plains of India. The soil here is rich, the rivers broad, the skies vast. You stand at the gates of Delhi, where banners ripple and elephants trumpet. This is the Mughal Empire, descendants of both Mongols and Timur, but dressed in the silks of India, speaking Persian and ruling with grandeur that leaves even the Ottomans glancing eastward in awe. One mainstream fact: the Mughal dynasty was founded in 1526 by Babur, who defeated the Sultan of Delhi at the Battle of Panipat using cannons, a weapon that thundered against war elephants. You picture the clash: elephants roaring, muskets cracking, dust clouds billowing, and Babur's men holding their ground with strange, deafening firepower. From this victory, the Mughals carved their realm, one that will stretch across most of the Indian subcontinent. You wander through the gardens of Agra, where Babur himself preferred to sit beside flowing water, listening to the murmur of fountains. Gardens mattered deeply to the Mughals. They are paradise brought to earth, geometry made green. Quirky fact: Babur was so fond of melons from Central Asia that he wept when he could not taste them in India, writing verses of homesickness in his diary. You imagine a conqueror, victorious in battle, yet undone by the absence of fruit. Generations unfold. You walk with Akbar the Great, Babur's grandson, a ruler of vision. His court is alive with debate. Scholars of Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and even Zoroastrianism gathered together. Akbar listens, weighing ideas, asking questions. He abolishes the jizya tax on non-Muslims, marries Hindu princesses, builds Fatehpur Sikri with palaces that blend Persian arches and Indian carvings. You stroll through its courtyards at sunset, walls glowing red, parrots shrieking overhead. Quirky anecdote: Akbar once kept a hall of curiosity where he weighed himself against grains, gold, or fruit, distributing them later to the poor. Imagine a crowd watching as their emperor sits patiently on a giant scale, laughing as baskets of sugarcane tip him upward. Jahangir, Akbar's son, paints the empire with refinement. He loves nature, commissioning miniatures of birds, flowers, and animals in exquisite detail. You hold a manuscript page where a falcon's feathers are drawn so finely you swear they ruffle in the breeze. His court is scented with rosewater, his throne surrounded by carpets heavy with embroidery. Yet even emperors falter. Jahangir's love for wine and opium was notorious, and chroniclers wrote that some evenings he staggered so much he leaned on courtiers like a child. Historians debate whether this indulgence weakened his rule, but his artistry endures. Then comes Shah Jahan, whose grief builds marble. You walk into the Taj Mahal at dawn, its dome glowing pink against the river. Built as a mausoleum for his wife Mumtaz Mahal, it is both monument and love letter. Step closer. The marble is carved with flowers, inlaid with precious stones: jasper, jade, lapis lazuli. Light shifts across its surface as if the building itself breathes. Quirky detail: architects designed the minarets to lean slightly outward so that in an earthquake they would fall away from the tomb. You press your hand to the cool stone, sensing not just love, but careful, deliberate genius. But the empire is not only domes and gardens. You march with Mughal armies into the Deccan, where cannons roll and elephants carry howdahs painted with gold. Soldiers carry matchlocks. Riders brandish curved sabers, banners flap. Villages fall, fortresses crumble, tribute flows north. Yet resistance always simmers. You hear Marathi voices whisper of Shivaji, the warrior king who will carve out space against Mughal dominance. Historians still debate. Were the Mughals tolerant rulers holding diverse lands together, or conquerors straining under the weight of resentment? You walk among farmers who pay taxes heavy as yokes. Their fields lush, yet their voices weary. And the answer feels complicated. Quirky moments soften the grandeur. Court musicians play sitars and tablas late into the night, their rhythms hypnotic. Poets recite verses comparing emperors to suns, their queens to moons. One story tells of Shah Jahan's daughter Jahanara, who wrote poetry herself and walked barefoot through gardens to show humility. Another speaks of Jahangir's chain of justice, a golden chain hanging outside his palace, which any subject could tug to demand fairness. You touch its links, wondering how often it rang and whether justice truly answered. Art flourishes everywhere. Carpets are woven so finely that knots blur into paint. Miniatures show battles with faces so small you squint to see expressions. Architecture crowns the land. The Red Fort in Delhi, the Jama Masjid with its soaring minarets, palaces where peacocks once strutted. You climb a marble balcony and look out at the Yamuna River, its waters gleaming in moonlight, the city alive with lamps and voices. Religion, too, is a thread. Sufi shrines attract pilgrims, their courtyards glowing with candles, their songs haunting in the night. Qawwals sing verses of longing that blur love for human and divine. You sit on a carpet, listening to harmoniums and clapping rhythms, the crowd swaying, eyes closed, hands raised. Faith here is lived in poetry and music as much as in law. The Mughals endure centuries, but like all dynasties, they waver. Aurangzeb, stern and devout, bans music in court, restores strict taxes, and pushes southward endlessly. His empire grows vast, but his severity frays loyalty. You ride with his caravans, endless miles, soldiers weary, banners tattered. Historians argue, did Aurangzeb's rigor preserve the empire or hasten its collapse? You feel the exhaustion in his ranks, the uncertainty in his shadow. Still, for now, the Mughal world glitters. Domes shine under sun. Gardens murmur with fountains, carpets bloom like fields, poetry drifts in every breeze. At night, in the Taj Mahal's courtyard, you sit under stars, the marble glowing faintly, the Yamuna flowing beside it. You hear echoes, Babur's cannons, Akbar's debates, Jahangir's falcons, Shah Jahan's grief. They linger in stone, in silk, in song, and you, resting against cool marble, carry the Mughal story forward, knowing that shadows of empire loom. But tonight, the gardens are still, the moonlight kind, and history breathes softly through every arch. The marble glow of the Taj Mahal fades behind you, and you find yourself in a different age, a time when sails blot the horizon, when gunpowder smoke curls overseas, when the world shrinks under the boots of Europeans. The 18th and 19th centuries are an age of shadows for Muslim countries. When old empires fray and new powers intrude, you stand on a shoreline, waves licking your feet, and see ships flying flags of Britain, France, Portugal, and Holland. Their cannons bristling, their holds filled with cargo, their captains eyeing coasts not as distant wonders, but as possessions to be claimed, one mainstream fact. By the late 1700s, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe. Once mighty, it now staggered under debt, corruption, and external pressure. You wander through Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, where janissaries, once the backbone of Ottoman armies, now mutter with discontent, their muskets more threatening to sultans than to foreign foes. Markets still bustle, mosques still rise, but you sense weariness in the stones, as if centuries of glory have dulled into inertia. Meanwhile, in India, the Mughals decline. You stand in Delhi's Red Fort, its marble halls echoing with emptiness. The emperor still wears a crown, but his power is hollow. It is the East India Company that rules now, a corporation with soldiers and cannons, taxes and treaties. Quirky fact. Clerks of the company sometimes signed contracts in English on one side and Persian on the other, as though business itself wore two faces. You pick up such a sheet, its ink smudged, its meanings heavy. North Africa feels the tremor too. You walk through Algiers, where corsairs once raided boldly across the Mediterranean. Now French ships patrol, their cannons pounding fortresses. In Egypt, Napoleon's army arrives in 1798, their boots stomping across sand that once echoed with pharaohs. Yet here, amid battle, scholars come too. Scientists sketch pyramids, linguists copy inscriptions. One mainstream fact: the Rosetta Stone, discovered in Egypt, gave the world its key to reading ancient hieroglyphs. You lean over it in Cairo, dust brushing your fingers, and realize that conquest often comes wrapped with curiosity. Scholars still debate. Was European intrusion inevitable, the result of industrial might, or could Muslim empires have modernized enough to resist? You wander through streets where printing presses struggle to take root, where scholars debate innovation, where rulers hesitate between tradition and reform. The tension hums like a string pulled taut, vibrating but unresolved. Quirky details slip in. In Istanbul, some sultans hired European instructors to train their armies, but Janissaries mocked them, calling their drills dances. In Cairo, Muhammad Ali, the Albanian soldier who seized power in the early 1800s, imported French chefs for his court, serving croissants beside kebabs. Imagine guests nibbling flaky pastries while plotting military campaigns. East and West meet not only in treaties, but in kitchens. You drift into the Persian world, where Qajar Shahs sit on peacock thrones, their mustaches waxed, their jewels dazzling. Yet behind the sparkle lies debt. Concessions to Britain and Russia, railways and mines leased to foreigners. You sit in a tea house in Tehran, smoke curling from hookahs, and hear merchants grumble that even their carpets now bear foreign contracts. Across the seas, in Southeast Asia, the Dutch tighten their grip on Spice Islands, the British on Malaya, the French on Indochina. Muslim sultanates that once thrived on trade now bow to colonial tariffs. In Aceh, in Sumatra, you hear whispers of rebellion, imams preaching resistance. Yet gunboats loom, their iron sides unmoved by prayers. And still, daily life goes on. You walk through bazaars in Damascus, where storytellers still spin tales of Antar the warrior poet. In Fez, artisans still hammer brass into bowls, their sparks flying like fireflies. In Java, women still weave batik, the wax and dye staining their fingers. Even under shadow, culture breathes. Resilient, stubborn, historians wrestle with this period. Was it a decline, as once written, or simply a transformation under pressure? You sense both as you walk, ruins beside resilience, surrender beside stubbornness. A janissary leans lazily against a wall, his uniform faded, while a merchant's child scribbles letters in a madrasa, eyes bright with hunger to learn. Empires may falter, but people endure. Quirky stories lighten the gloom. In one chronicle, a Moroccan ruler was so intrigued by European clocks that he filled a whole room with them, their ticking so loud that visitors fled, dizzy with sound. In Cairo, Napoleon's soldiers reportedly kept cats in their barracks, both for companionship and to hunt rats. Imagine soldiers in stiff uniforms laughing as kittens tumble across their boots. Even conquest has soft edges. At night, you wander along the Bosphorus, lanterns flickering on both banks. The water reflects Europe and Asia, old and new, empire and colony. A boat drifts past, its oars creaking, its passengers murmuring prayers. Above, stars burn indifferent, eternal. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down, but also the pulse of persistence. Muslim countries stand in shadows, yes, but not in silence. You close your eyes, hearing waves lap, bells toll in foreign ships, muezzins call from weary minarets. The world is changing fast, faster than domes and palaces can keep pace. Yet in this twilight, you sense something stirring. The story is not finished. The people will endure, the faith will endure, and from the rubble of empire, new voices will rise. The twilight of old empires lingers. But as the 20th century dawns, a new rhythm begins to beat across Muslim lands. You find yourself walking streets filled with protests and parades, hearing voices demanding freedom, not from rival dynasties, but from colonial masters. The world wars reshape the globe, and in their wake, Muslim countries stir awake from the long shadow of occupation. One mainstream fact. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, its lands carved into new nations by treaties like Sèvres and Lausanne. You wander through Istanbul in 1923, where Mustafa Kemal Ataturk proclaims the Republic of Turkey, stripping away sultan and caliph alike. The call to prayer is translated into Turkish. Fez is banned. Latin letters replace Arabic script. You walk into a schoolroom where children trace new letters, their chalk squeaking, their eyes wide. Some smile at the change, others grumble at lost tradition. Historians still debate. Was Ataturk's revolution a liberation into modernity, or a rupture too sharp? You hear both, carried on the wind. Elsewhere, independence blooms slowly. In Egypt, you march with crowds in 1919, students and peasants waving flags, demanding Britain leave. The air smells of sweat and dust. The streets echo with chants. Quirky fact. Women in veils cut British telegraph lines, their scissors hidden under cloaks, their laughter barely restrained. You grin at the thought, small blades snipping wires that bound an empire. Decades later, Nasser's voice rings out over radios, promising dignity, promising Arab unity. In India, the sun bakes as you join a crowd, listening to Jinnah call for a homeland. Partition comes in 1947, birthing Pakistan from the old Mughal heartland. You stand in Lahore's streets, trains rolling in heavy with refugees, voices shouting, crying, singing. Mosques fill with prayers of thanks and grief together. Quirky image. Some families carried only brass teapots across borders, clinging to them like treasure because in the chaos, tea still meant home. North Africa shifts too. You stroll through Algiers, where French cafes buzz, but alleys echo with rebellion. In the 1950s, voices rise, some with guns, some with poems. By 1962, Algeria stands free, though scarred. In Morocco and Tunisia, flags unfurl, green and red replacing tricolors. The Sahara wind tastes suddenly sharper, freer. The Middle East reshapes itself. Oil gushes in Arabia, once desert villages, now glowing with neon. You walk through Dahran in the 1950s, seeing pipelines snake across sand like steel rivers. The smell of petroleum mixes with cardamom coffee. One mainstream fact. By the 1970s, Saudi Arabia and Gulf states wield oil wealth as global power, reshaping the world's economies. Quirky note. Some Bedouin, newly wealthy, were said to buy refrigerators before they had electricity, simply as status symbols. You picture a shiny fridge standing useless in a tent, absurd yet true. In Iran, you wander through Tehran's streets in 1979, the air thick with chants, banners, and the smell of burning tires. The Shah flees, the Ayatollah rises, and the world watches a revolution that fuses politics and religion. Scholars argue endlessly. Was it inevitable or preventable? You stand in the crowd, the uncertainty as heavy as the smoke. In Africa, Muslim voices weave into independence struggles. You walk through Dakar, through Khartoum, through Zanzibar. Markets buzz, radios hum with speeches, drums beat in celebrations. Yet borders drawn by colonizers slice tribes and faiths, sowing friction. You hear laughter in one street, gunfire in another. Independence is never simple. Quirky moments brighten even heavy times. In Cairo, when television first arrives, families crowd around one set per neighborhood. Neighbors piling into courtyards to watch black and white screens flicker. Children gape, mothers scold. Fathers argue politics through static. In Pakistan, cricket becomes near religion, with stadiums roaring like mosques at prayer. You sit in the stands, tea in hand, swept by the energy. By the late 20th century, Muslim countries stretch from Morocco's Atlantic shores to Indonesia's islands, each carrying echoes of ancient empires, yet living in modern rhythms. Skyscrapers rise in Dubai, their glass gleaming like desert mirages. Universities flourish in Malaysia, students bent over laptops instead of parchment. Call to prayer still drifts across rooftops, but now it mingles with car horns, factory whistles, and phone ringtones. Historians debate what ties these lands together. Is it faith alone, or culture, or simply history's accidents? You sense it in fragments. The taste of cardamom coffee in Riyadh, the tiles of Isfahan, the domes of Istanbul, the songs of Senegalese griots, the manuscripts of Timbuktu, the lanterns of Fez. Threads, tangled yet strong. At night, you stand again by the sea, waves slapping gently, stars clear. You think of where you began, Arabia before Islam, poets chanting under desert skies. Now the journey has carried you across centuries, across empires, across oceans. Muslim countries endure, sometimes powerful, sometimes oppressed, always reshaping. A quirky story for the present. In some Gulf cities, Falcon hospitals exist. Gleaming clinics where birds of prey are treated with more care than many humans once received. You smile, thinking of caliphs with falcons centuries ago. Some things never change, only glitter brighter. And so, the story settles. From desert dawn to oil-lit night. From prophets to pipelines. From calligraphy to skyscrapers. From caravan bells to airplane engines. Muslim countries carry both history and hope, their echoes stretching endlessly. You close your eyes as the tide hisses on the sand. The journey is long, but the hum of it lulls you. Stars wheel above, domes glimmer faintly in your memory, and voices murmur in 1,000 tongues, all fading into one soft rhythm. The story lingers, but the night grows quiet. Wind down 300 words. Now, let the noise fade. Let the markets close, their lanterns dimmed. Let the ships lower sails, rocking gently in calm harbors. Imagine the great domes you walked beneath, their tiles no longer dazzling but softened under moonlight. Picture courtyards empty, fountains stilled, scrolls rolled and shelved. History breathes slower now. The armies you marched with, the rulers you watched, the poets you listened to, they all step back into silence. The clash of swords, the roar of cannons, the chants of protests dissolve into whispers. What remains is softer. The steady call to prayer echoing across rooftops, the rustle of palm trees, the sigh of wind across dunes. Think of the textures. Cool marble under your hand, rough carpet beneath your feet, warm brass cups in your palm. Think of the scents. Cinnamon, rosewater, fresh ink, sea salt. They all blur together now, fading into comfort. The centuries fold themselves like pages, and you are left not with weight, but with lightness. Stories do not vanish. They settle like dust in beams of sun, floating quietly. Empires rise, empires fall, yet life continues. Children learning, markets opening, rivers flowing. Breathe slowly. Let the hum of history turn into a lullaby. The voices of scholars, the songs of poets, the murmur of pilgrims, all soften into a rhythm that matches your heartbeat. You are no longer walking through bazaars or palaces. You are drifting, safe, calm, carried by time's gentle tide. Close your eyes. The story is still there, always waiting. But for now, it rests. And so should you.